and welcome to Tea Time with Jesse, and I have a very special guest for you all today. This is XiaomaNYC.
I thought we were doing this in Chinese.
Oh, you want to do it in Chinese? we actually did. Oh, okay. I was like, like I actually didn't tell you what we were doing it in. But cool. So we have a rare guest that could have done the whole podcast in Chinese, and you actually did do a whole podcast in Chinese with me, didn't you? Once.
I think it may have, yeah, the first part, yeah.
It was good. It was a good time. But give a short introduction for our fans who don't know you, although I'm guessing that, honestly, probably all my fans know you, so.
I am a YouTuber, content creator, businessman as well. And what I do is I make videos on the internet, mostly surprising people by speaking their language, but I do other things as well.
So a lot of language content, and I'm just a big fan of the way that you get like people not to be scared of doing the language, which is like the big thing is like a lot of people are scared of speaking the second language, and that just like that makes them like freeze up. Well,
I think that like to be honest, I'm a natural introvert. I was never good with cameras or good with speaking to people in public, especially strangers, and But doing this, I feel like, has kind of opened my eyes to the reality of the situation, which is that most people are actually very excited to hear you speak their language, even if it's terrible. Yeah. Which, to be honest, most of the languages that I learn to like barely having the ability to have a very basic conversation, and that's it. Yeah.
How many languages would you say you got there though for like the basic communication?
Around 50.
About 50.
Yeah.
So that's pretty. Yeah. How many?
I've studied more languages right now than probably almost anyone.
I was going to say, like, once you get to 50, that you can at least hold some semblance of a conversation with, there can't be like another 1,000 people up there,
No, it's a very limited number. I mean, I will not make any claims to being able to speak all of them, even at a basic conversation level, like to have. Because I don't review them, you know. So a language that I studied 2 years ago, like if you wanted to have a conversation with me right now in Navajo, it would probably be a stretch for me.
But luckily, that doesn't come up too much.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. So I mean, there are certain languages that like I get more practice with just by living in New York. I mean, Spanish is everywhere. Like French, I don't really speak French, but there's so many people who speak French that like I'm kind of forced to try to at least speak a little bit of French occasionally, so I can kind of remember some of that. Mandarin, obviously, like I'm married to a Chinese woman, speaking that all the time with her and my kids. And then Cantonese, just by living in New York, there's tons of Cantonese people. And then,
so you get a good use of them. So we're going to go over language learning, YouTubing, and all that sort of stuff. But I want to start out by making you some tea. And I asked you back.
This is why I'm here.
This is why you're here. This is like literally.
I just wanted some tea, and you're like, if you want some of my tea for free, you're gonna have to be on my fucking podcast. Can we curse?
Yeah. Why not? Why not? By the way, that didn't happen. But people are like, oh my god, Jesse's really like that. They're like, we finally found out what he's like.
Jesse's very nice.
But yeah, take a look at the this. I half drunk through this one, but this is the Qianjiazhai raw pu'er. This is from the tea mountain that I went to in June, and it's like.
That's beautiful.
I mean, honestly, if I could do all my teas like this.
It also just feels really nice. Like
it's just the quality of the leaves is great. So we're going to make some of this. You have spent time in China and know Pu'er Tea, so it's always great to be able to
some
find
extent,
somebody.
Not as much as you, but
no, but you know it exists. Like you forget what I deal with on the internet. I mean, it's like the part of the fun for me is that like there are new types of tea that people just have never tried before, and it's always fun to be able to bring people's like first experience of having like a raw pu'er or a cooked pu'er or something like that, or even oolongs. Like oolongs. For people that have lived in China, you've heard of oolong before, but a lot of people haven't. So, when you lived in China, what was your favorite like tea to drink or food to eat?
Oh man, I gotta be honest. Like I wasn't a huge tea head in China. No. I would say what most interested me about Chinese teas was just all the people walking around with these like thermoses full of flowers, like you'd just be full of flowers.
If you go the
whole thing,
the flower tea.
And I was like very confused at first. I was like, what are you drinking? Like, why are you drinking like like a cup of flowers?
The cab drivers will have this like like chrysanthemum tea or jasmine tea.
Yeah, it was chrysanthemum, and I was because I had never seen that before in America. Nobody carrying around like a mug of flowers, you know, and drinking that wherever you go. And then also as well, people
take a sniff of that. Sorry,
there's
good stuff. That's
nice.
Good stuff.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, so you're saying also people go around
carrying around mugs of just hot water in general. You know, you have it just wherever you go, just a giant ass thermos.
Where did you move your cup or did not? I'm gonna get your cup.
I
put it over here. But yeah, if you go to Beijing and you take like cabs or whatever, the cab drivers will be just like pounding this flower tea all day.
Yeah, cabs and students. You know, I was at a university when I lived in China, so. Just students would always take it to class, you know, big bottles of hot water and thermoses. And
it's just part of life. It's just part of life. Cheers.
Cheers.
Here you go. So take a sip. Oh, I love that. This tea, it has like a little bit of lemony flavor in there, like very fresh. You know, the raw pu'er, when it's young like this, normally it's like kind of very sharp. But for whatever reason, I always find this to be like super juicy and like lemony, and it has like that nice sweetness to it.
I love the consistency of it. It's like almost milky somehow.
Yeah, the mouthfeel
texture.
The mouthfeel in Chinese say 很顺, 很柔. Yeah, like 柔. The like soft and 顺 is like smooth.
It's really good.
So this is the Master Series tea. So these are the ones we literally got straight from the tea mountain, and then put directly into the cakes. They press these all at the mountain. They have like I saw it. They have a machine that will do the pressing.
Wow.
They take the tea in like a cylinder and they weigh it so that you get exactly the amount you're supposed to. And then they have a little steam thing that comes through it, so they're just pliable enough to press. And then they have a press that puts it down. And we specifically requested that these are pressed a little bit looser because sometimes with those tight pu'er cakes, you need a knife to break them off, and most people in outside of China don't have a pu'er knife hanging around. So it's
there's a pu'er knife.
Yeah, it's called a pu'er.
Specifically for cleaving off chunks.
It's like it's like an ice pick, like a mini ice pick.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
you know, so it's but again, most people in the States are not going to have that. So
you know, when I look at these leaves, the first thing I think to myself as a stupid American is, can I cook these into a dish? Like fry it up like spinach and eat them?
I mean, in Yunnan, they have like fried tea leaves as like a part of a dish. Like usually you wouldn't just eat a whole plate of them, but they're like part of
garnish?
Certain dishes. Like I think they're part of a, we'll look this up. I should get like a Chinese cooking channel to like, you know, work with me on this. But if you go, usually they're like, you know, they'll have some meat in it and they'll have like some fried tea leaves in there too. But it's not like a salad. But yeah, the
it just looks like
of it.
Spinach when you look at this. You know?
Yeah, we can take a look. I don't know if we got our camera over here, but take a look at that. Very nice.
Like a tea salad. It's something you could actually make.
I wonder. Like I mean, the innovation is just waiting there to be done.
Yeah.
I think part of the actually part of the challenge for me is like I like respecting the traditional culture, but you can't be a slave to the traditional culture in the sense that you never think creatively. You know?
Sure.
So it's like that's exactly the sort of thing maybe I should be working on and trying to get more of. So. Cheers again. Ooh. Thanks so much for coming over for tea.
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you for having me.
So,
and this is round number 2 of the tea.
So let's start with a little bit of a background. Like, how did you even think to start learning so many languages in the first place? Was it just like purely interest?
Well, I didn't. I started with learning Chinese. That was the first, you know, I mean, summer after high school in 2008, I started learning Chinese, and then I ended up getting a scholarship to go to China where I went, and you know, there's a whole cottage industry in China of foreigners who are on TV and radio for these competitions where you speak Chinese and you see which foreigner has the best Chinese.
Did you do like the Hanyuqiao or something like that?
I didn't do Hanyuqiao, but I did a similar competition on CCTV, which has their own, at least had at the time, their own version of Hanyuqiao.
What do you think as like a language person of these language competitions? Like, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it like just completely unrealistic and like for whatever reason it only happens in Asia?
Oh, I think it's great. I mean, I think for me, I had a very competitive mindset, and I wanted to have like the best of a language, and so I think I kind of naturally gravitated towards this idea of like being able to compete in a televised contest to see who has the best Chinese.
And it is a lot of fun to go on those shows.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like super fun.
It's super fun, yeah. But the thing is, I actually, ironically, given my current career choice, I actually never was very good at it. I was always very good at learning languages, but I never was good on stage. I got so nervous. I was never good in front of a camera.
Also, I always felt as a guy, we look not too dissimilar. But there were people on these shows where like I would go onto some of these shows on Chinese TV and there'd be like a 5'11" blonde girl from Siberia who just looked amazing. Right. And I was like, I'm not winning this competition. It doesn't even matter. I want to have her on stage and not be like, not have me there. Yeah. I think it's one of the reasons I like comedy is because I don't know whether this is like a deep personal realization moment, but it's like, I feel like the comedy allows me to earn my position on the stage because I don't look that good, Right. But those shows are a lot of fun to do. And do you remember a routine that you did for the competition, or like what kind of thing did you have to do?
Oh yeah, I did some danko xiangsheng. I think I just borrowed some routines from I think Dashan. I did a couple things. I did. I still remember, this is actually from YouTube, but I still remember there are these things that I've memorized. 推动中美合作伙伴关系不断向前发展，美国总统奥巴马在华盛顿白宫推行办公室会见了在美主持第3轮中美战略与经济对话的胡锦涛主席和他。That was actually not from the competitions. It was from later when I got back to the States and I wanted to keep doing the same type of thing on YouTube. This is around 2011.
I really should put some of my guanko up on the thing. 太平洋、印度洋、大西洋、北冰洋、欧洲、亚洲、非洲、美洲、大洋洲. That's the sort of stuff that'll work well on the internet.
But at some point, I realized that because again, I had this competitive mindset to want to do these competitions. But I realized, like you, I'm not like especially good looking, and I'm also not I'm not great on stage, and also. Like, to get to that true pinnacle of Chinese, it's so funny because people will approach me in the street and be like, "Hey, Xiaoma, like, oh my God, your Chinese is so good. Like, you must be like the best Chinese in the world." And like, the reality is like, I do speak, very good Chinese for a foreigner, but like, I'm not in the upper echelon. I'm in like maybe the top 1% or the top 0.1%, but like. There are so many foreigners.
To truly be a linguistic performer, because like Xiangsheng, the actual comedy that I said they call it it's 语言艺术. It's a linguistic performance art.
Yeah,
that's like a whole other level. Like regular Chinese people can't do that.
You have to study for many years, and then when you look at the skill of people like, you, but then also Dashan, and also it's French guy Julian.
Yeah, Julian.
Their level is just so extraordinary, and to get there, you need to spend so much time studying Chinese. And at some point, I just realized like I just don't want to do that. Like I'm not gonna get to the level. I'm not gonna surpass this guy. They've already been there, done that. I need to kind of make my own way.
But I think that's correct. Like period, full stop. You have to make your own way. That's one of the things I felt like. Yeah. I always felt uncomfortable in that circle and didn't spend too much time in that circle of foreign performers because I was like, there are so many. It felt very much like foreign performers in China were a tool and certain things being built needed that tool. But it was never like, oh, these people are succeeding because they really have made a better work than everybody else.
To make it clear to people who are not familiar with this phenomenon, which I don't really think exists in any other country but China, there are people who, there's an entire cottage industry of foreigners who perform in Chinese at a very high level on Chinese TV and radio. And there's people, not too many, but there's, a handful, there's a dozen maybe, who do this as their full-time living, whether it's actors or,
hosting,
on TV, comedy, in Chinese, right? And I don't, I've talked with my friend Matt, who speaks Japanese at a very high level, and he's told me that there's nothing similar to this phenomenon.
Even in Japan.
In Japan, yeah. I mean, there are TV shows that will get foreigners as guests on panels.
Sure.
But there's no industry of foreigners in Japan who do hosting gigs or comedy full time at a high level in Japanese.
And that was also one
according to him anyway.
Yeah. But it is a weird thing, and on one hand, it was very useful, I feel, in the beginning of my career, because when I when I first went to China, I had the Fulbright Fellowship for 1 year, but that wasn't a ton of money. And then afterwards, if I wanted to do this full time and perform in Chinese full time, it was very good that there was like actually an industry for it. On the other hand, I realized very quickly that you're going to max out because it was not the sort of thing where like I could audition for real roles and outcompete Chinese actors. It was either there was a role for a foreigner and then you can outcompete all the foreign actors, or you're just not in the industry at all. And it sucks to admit that, but it was, I think, pretty close to true, and I think now completely true.
You're competing in an industry that's extremely niche and demand for which, you know, can't be above like how many presenters and TV hosts are needed who are foreigners who speak extremely good Mandarin. It's just not that high, because why wouldn't they hire a Chinese host? You know,
so moving on so you were like, okay, I'm not going to be doing these language competitions, but there was something that you felt was the combination of competitiveness and striving and language, and then I guess it kind of eventually came out through your YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I liked showing off, you know, and I liked being able to showcase my linguistic skills, and for me it was cool because I was never good at this in high school. Like it wasn't something that I knew that I could do, and I had studied languages in high school, but I just didn't I never really figured out how to actually learn to speak them. You know, and then when I started studying Chinese and I actually lived in China for a year and I got good at it, I was like, wow, you know, this is really cool, and this is kind of a skill and talent that I have for speaking languages. And so, all right, maybe I'm not good at, you know, good on stage, and, you know, maybe I'm not the best looking, you know, and maybe I'm not really that funny either, but like, I can speak this language pretty well.
Yeah, let's go on with other things you're not good at. No, I'm not good.
Right.
You're not good looking.
But I was good with languages.
My teeth are a little bit crooked, and you know, I have a wart on my skin. No, but the language is and I think like I think that the cool thing about a language and performing in another language is that people see a lot of the work in Chinese. They have a saying that 台上1分钟，台下10年功. So 1 minute on stage takes 10 years of work behind the scenes to pull off. And I feel like any sort of performance in the second language, you just kind of get that. You know, like people are able to see the fact that you put together the work and that you're doing something that's not going to be easy to do. And so it opens the audience up to you. They're like more inherently open to being nice to you. And then if you can pull it off by really making them laugh, or really making them like, you know, amazed at the language skill or whatever it is you're doing, then like, you know, the audience is ready for it. They're there for you to be good. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, the first really breakthrough hit that I had on YouTube with an American or English speaking audience, you know, that video where it got like 80 million views, of me speaking Chinese in restaurants. You know, that video, people were like, oh, wow, that's so easy. Like I could just go and, you know, do that too. And a lot of people did it, you know, but, you know, and it was and there were no, you know, ostensible expenses, you know, associated with it. So I was just like going and making this video, but like the reality is it took me, you know, 10 years to learn the Chinese to that level where I was able to do that.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. It's like, you know, the person who designed the Nike swoosh or whatever. It's like, it looks simple, but like, you know, to be able to have the skill to be like, that's how it's going to look.
There's a very famous quote that is attributed to Pablo Picasso. I don't know if this is apocryphal or if it actually happened, but he is said to have been approached by somebody in a restaurant who recognized him and said, "Hey, can I get your autograph?" You know, and Pablo Picasso he like quickly drew a little portrait on a napkin and signed it, and he said, "Here, $1 million, please." And she was like, "What? $1 million? That took you like literally less than 30 seconds to make." And he said, "Yes, it took me 30 seconds to make, but it also took me 20 years of study and constant, you know, practice to be able to be at this level where I can do that."
Yeah. I mean, it takes all that stuff kinds of point up baked into the work. And then I'd be interested in what your take on this is. let's say you put in that work, but that work may not be seen by all cultures at once. Like, I'll just give you an example. Like, I did a joke that I did on Chinese TV about the Boston accent, about like there are usually a lot of R's, like 经常就是美国人说话就是儿化音很重，
It's hard for Chinese people to relate to.
但我们波士顿人不这么说，波士顿人都 I park my car in Harvard Yard, like so there's a park my car in Harvard Yard joke, and I put this on Instagram, and I had a bunch of people being like, oh, that's so hack, that joke is so old, and I was like, what I'm doing with that joke is that in China where everybody's a foreigner, I wanted to be a guy from Boston. I want to be a real person. It turned out that it took me years to find a breakthrough joke where I could like relate to what they understood enough and get them to be like, oh, you're not even an American. You're like Jesse from Boston. But that sort of like work behind the scenes is not always seen by the audience in another country. They're just like, oh, you literally took a hack joke and did it.
Right.
Do you ever feel like sometimes you create a work that is going to be playing in one culture and another culture a different way, and you just have to like deal with the fact that people all over the internet are going to interpret it differently?
Yeah, I mean, you can't as a performer or as a creator, you don't have control over how people are going to perceive what you do, and in fact, it almost isn't like you can't have any expectation on what the audience should know, and the fact that it took you so much time to make this video, like the audience doesn't appreciate it. Well, it doesn't really matter because, if you think about your own personal consumption of entertainment or media, like, you're not thinking about how much time and money it took them to make this Netflix show. You're just thinking about whether it was good or it was not.
Did I enjoy it or not?
And if it was shitty, it doesn't matter how long it took them to make. You're just like, oh, it was a shitty show. I'm going to click on to the next thing. So as a performer and as an entertainer, I can't, and even just as a businessman, with a language course business, I can't have any expectation on the audience. I have to just do what I think people will enjoy, and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm not right, and very often I'm not right. And when I'm not, like, there's nothing I can do but move on.
Yeah.
To the next thing.
How do you feel like when you spend, say, like weeks learning a language and go somewhere to speak it, and then the results don't come?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that happens all the time. That happens all the time. And again, there's nothing I can do about it. I've spent weeks on videos that turn out to be a total bust, and I don't even post them.
And then you don't even post them.
Yeah.
And then they'll finish them, and you look at them, and you say, that's not worth it.
Usually I will post them. I mean, but the worst is like when I spend all this time and money, and I've spent like thousands of dollars and weeks and months of my time making videos that just turn out to be total shit. And like, I think they're cool, and when I post them, I'm like, damn, this is gonna go super viral. But then I post it and like nobody cares, and the comments are all like, this is retarded.
Have you ever thought of having a separate channel that's called Xiaoma Just Shit, where it's just the shitty videos?
No, because I feel like YouTube is very intelligent. Like, it serves up the content. Like, because the great part about YouTube is like, if it's not good, nobody will see it because YouTube just won't promote it to them.
Yeah, this is actually,
like,
I actually have been like, I tell this to people who are trying to get started, and like originally it sounds kind of like pessimistic or like it should be depressing, but I think it's not. It's like, if you're
nobody's gonna watch your stupid videos.
If you're bad, no one will see it. No one will see you fail. It's actually impossible. If you are good, people will see it. If you are bad, no one will see it. So you really have complete openness to fail when you have no following.
Unless you go viral for the wrong reasons, which does happen occasionally, but in 99% of the time, you just won't go viral because your videos are bad. And or I don't want to say bad, but not interesting. Not interesting to some audience that could be interested in videos.
How do you decide what type of video is going to be interesting on YouTube?
I mean, I just have to, like, I made videos for a very long time that never went viral, and I just kind of, it was just fun for me. I like making videos about languages. I like speaking languages and studying languages, and so I made videos for a very long time with nobody watching. And then, occasionally something would go viral, and when something went viral, I just would try to make more stuff similar to that, and it's essentially remain my approach. But I always have to make stuff that is in concert with who I am, and I don't make stuff that I am not good at or I'm not interested in. And when I try to do those things, I just inevitably fail, and the results are it's not great.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times people think, oh, if you're good at making content and you have the followers, then like, you know, whatever you want to do is going to work. And I haven't found it to be.
It's not true. No,
I haven't found it.
It's totally not true. I mean, I always hope that would be the case. You know, I consistently try to experiment on my channel. And sometimes the experiments succeed, and that's great. I mean, a great example of this is my, you know, massage videos. Like, I just tried doing it one time and it ended up working out, and now I do all kinds of like weird massages and body treatment. Like, for some weird reason, people enjoy watching me get massages and like haircuts and
this
shaves.
Is like literally my life stream, you know. Like, I'm like such a
I know.
guy.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of people will be like, "Wow, that's like the cushiest job ever to get massages." And so yeah, you know, sometimes, you know, but then like a lot of times I try other, you know, experiments and they just like don't work.
Yeah, you'd be like, well, I'd also like to wear fancy watches, and then people might not care.
Just not interested. You know,
so
food
funny.
videos is something I've tried to get.
I would watch you get a massage
for a long time. Yeah, lots of people want to watch me get
massage.
massages, right? It happens to be a different audience from the people who like watching me speak languages in public, but you know, and they're always very confused when I upload like these weird.
Did I ever
videos.
show you the video? I made like a video of a massage I got in China. They did this thing called huoliao. Have you heard of this? It's fire treatment.
Is it cupping with spreading a?
No, they take a
Is it whacking your back with like torches?
No, they take a towel and lay it down on your back and spray it with alcohol and then light it on fire.
Oh God.
And it's supposed to like bring out the heat, but because the towel was wet and having alcohol on it, it won't like literally burn you immediately. It heats up the whole towel. And I remember I did a video blog on this way back that I actually never even released. But I didn't see this when it was happening because I was on my back and my friend was taking the video. And the guy had his alcohol in like basically like a nongfu spring water cup with like some holes poked in it. And he sprayed it on there and then he lit the thing and then it didn't light. And then he gives it like, and then he tries it again and it lit the second time. But that like the failure to light and then he was like, oh, it was like straight out of a cartoon.
That's so funny.
I'm like, I got to dig up that footage. But yeah, there's some wacky treatments for spa lifestyle. Where do you go? Oh, we went to the baths. In New York, in the Russian and Turkish baths.
New York is a great place. There's all kinds of people who will do many interesting and weird things to your body.
I love
New York
baths.
City.
I don't know if people know this about me, but I'm a big bath guy. I like to take a bath almost every night. Yeah. And here in LA, there's a Wee Spa, the Korean spa. If you want to go, we can go.
Oh God, yeah.
But the
sounds great actually.
But like I just love like that sort of thing. And
saunas.
I'd love to go to Japan and go to some of those onsens. Have you ever done that?
I don't. Oh, you know, no. The closest I've come, there's like Korean spas in New York where you can go and in the winter sit outdoors in the hot pool. Yeah, I haven't done it in Japan though.
Yeah, I gotta go. And if anybody has an onsen and wants to invite me to Japan, like I will go. I will totally go.
I'm in with you.
So anyway, so you have these things that you discover, like you discovered that people will watch you getting massages.
Yeah. How
How do you balance how much of your content is kind of giving the audience what they want and how much is that experimental, you have no idea whether it's going to work?
You know, Google has a nice I don't think they do this anymore, but they have that 20% rule where, you know, the audience spends 20% of their time, or the employees spend 20% of their time on kind of like free play sort of fun projects. And so I try to do something similar with my content. You know, every 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 videos, I try to do something weird, experimental, or edgy. And, you know, most of the time it doesn't work, but occasionally it does. And sometimes it leads to new and interesting avenues of success. So, you know, I mean, it's how it got me to this point. And I mean, now I'm spending a lot of time on my other businesses than content. But you know, as far as content goes, yeah, I like to experiment.
Yeah, because I feel like I always have this like temptation where it's like one of the reasons I started doing the short videos for the tea is because tea is actually, I think, a really good topic for short video because generally people in the West don't know that much about tea. So you may, hey, this is raw pu'er tea. I could totally talk about that for 60 seconds. But also, I sometimes worry that it took me too long to do something like this, where I'm like really breaking out of that mold. And I don't know if it's because I would be worried it wouldn't work, or you just realize that like, oh, it's not going to be the most time efficient way You know, you could make a show like this and maybe no one would watch it, you know.
Well,
so,
of course.
Yes.
But you have to assume, you know, when you do that 20% rule, you know, you have to assume that much of that time is going to be wasted.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not really a waste.
Yeah.
It's not really a waste. I mean, the final product, yes, nobody might watch it, but the learning that you get from it is possibly not a waste. I mean, because I've tried so many things on YouTube at this point, and I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. You know, and that's knowing what you're not good at is almost as important as knowing what you are good at.
Do you ever feel like there are things you want to be good at desperately that you're not good at?
Yes,
you keep trying?
Yes,
what
absolutely.
are those things?
Oh, many things. I mean, I wish I was funnier, for one. I wish I was a good storyteller. I'm not. I see so many YouTubers.
You don't think so?
No, I think I'm a terrible storyteller. I think there's so many YouTubers who are good at... I think the pinnacle of a good YouTuber is somebody who can make the most mundane day in their life interesting. Somebody like Casey Neistat is a perfect example of this.
Yeah, he really, a lot of those...
Taking a shit in the toilet, like 12 million views, you know? And it's just, it's like the artistry and the storytelling behind that is something that I've tried working on, but I'm just not there.
It's funny, you know? I was literally setting up that camera and we were talking about this. I said, like, I feel like I'm a better storyteller, creator, and not a good grindy creator, by which, like, those sort of projects, like, you may work for weeks learning a language on one video. Right. That sort of grindiness, I just find I don't have the stick with itness to do.
Yeah, I'm very good at doing something boring for a very long stretch of time.
Which is an incredibly valuable skill.
Yeah, like, in many cases, yes.
It's a very valuable skill when it can be paired to something you actually enjoy doing.
Well, I'll say it's great for learning languages, because learning languages, something that people don't understand is learning languages isn't actually hard. Like, if you want to learn French or if you want to learn Chinese, it's not rocket science, you know? You sit down an hour a day and you speak to somebody in French, you get a French tutor, or even just like you read a book, you do a course, you sit in, like, you will get good at French. You will be speaking French within a few months. Like, it will happen, you know? But the hard part is just sitting down.
Actually doing
slogging through this day after day after day. Can you do that? Most people can't.
Yeah.
You know, I can. I'm very good at that.
Like, can you slog and, like, grind? I can't.
Right? And that's what I did with Chinese. Yeah. And I got very
Chinese, you have to do that. And I went through those periods. Like, I took those intensive classes in China where we had to learn 100 characters a day, and then the next day we had a test on them. And I was able to do it for quite a while, but I think I clearly can't do it for years and years and years. But that sort of... That idea that the languages are not actually hard, they just need time. I feel like a lot of times people think there's a shortcut, and maybe for some things there are, but, like, you know, people, how did you learn how to read all those characters? I wrote them a bajillion times, and then eventually I can read them.
It's similar to things like losing weight or bodybuilding, you know? Like, if you want to lose weight, that's also not something that's very hard. There's no rocket science to losing weight. Like, you just eat less, but you eat less consistently. Yeah. You eat less a lot and just do it day after day after day after day until you're like, your mind is gonna fucking explode. Like, I want to eat some fucking chips right now, and you don't eat those chips. You know, like, you just have to do that a lot, right? Yeah. And so, like, I lost, 20 pounds in the past 2 months. Just by eating less.
I thought you looked good.
You know,
I thought you. Yeah. But it's
that's something I'm good at. It's something I'm good at.
I feel like that's the sort of thing that I really struggle with, and when I have succeeded, I've been able to really compartmentalize the thing. I was like, I'm going to make one tea video a day, every day, and I'm going to do that for as long as I really can. And in the beginning, it was necessary to get going, because in the beginning of those processes, you don't see results in day one. You really need to think of this as like, I'm putting $1 in the bank every day. And if I put $1 in the bank every day and there's interest, one day I'm going to look back in there and there's going to be a bunch of money in the bank.
That's right.
And so I think I heard a quote that kind of reminds me of this. It says, people radically overestimate what they can get done in 1 year and underestimate what they can get done in 5.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where, like, looking back, it's like, yeah, I always don't seem to get as much done as I want to today. But then when you look back over 5 years or 10 years, it's like I put a bunch of money in the bank, whether it's doing comedy shows or learning how to edit video or, being like, able to, throw up some basic lighting or whatever. That's right. That all stuff comes in there. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to try another tea. And thank you all for watching this first half. This is Xiaoma, and I'm Jesse, and we'll be right back.
The internet is a dangerous place. A VPN can help protect you from that danger. What danger? Think of something. Now think of something you haven't even thought of. That could happen to you. The problem with most VPNs, though, is they taste way worse than tea. We interviewed one of our coders to find out why. Well, you're asking why the VPN tastes worse than tea? What do you mean? It's software. It's not excuses. Of course, this could all be avoided by buying tea directly from Jesse's Tea House. Jesse gets his teas straight from small tea shops and tea farmers in China and puts them into his subscription service. Use the code JessePod for $10 off your first order of $30 or more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tea Time with Jesse. We're here today with XiaomaNYC. Thanks so much for coming by.
That was a great ad just there.
That was a good ad. Oh, it was so good, so good. I don't even know what we put there. Whatever it was great. But
Jesse, what's going on?
It's great. So we're going to try white tea now. I asked what you'd like. We're going to try this. This is the 2017 White Dew White Tea.
Wow.
I really love these leaves. I'm going to show you these leaves. This is part of the subscription box that launched in November, and it's going to continue through until February, although it'll still be available after that. It just won't be part of the
subscription. Why is it called white tea? Because it is not white.
So the question is an interesting question. So the Chinese usually...
This looks like leaves I would pick up in the park.
Yeah, look at
that.
Isn't that cool?
That is so cool.
So, and the reason is because white tea, what it is just picked, sun-dried. That's it.
Yeah.
So all the other teas that go through, they're fermented or they're roasted or they're whatever. The white tea is the simplest, kind of purest type of tea you can get in the sense that it's literally just leaves that have been sun-dried. And so it really is, you need to have good quality because like why do that with bad leaves?
Yeah.
But also the result of it is just a very pure, fresh flavor, which I really like. So we'll show that over here. You asked white tea, why is it called white tea? So the Chinese choose the color of the tea that they name it after the color of the tea liquor. So like the actual tea itself. Yeah. So that's why what in the West they call black tea, the Chinese call red tea because the liquor is kind of like a red, but the leaves are dark black. So the British called it black tea because the leaves were dark black. Yeah. But the Chinese call it white tea because the leaves are basically, the leaves have these white hairs on them. See if we can show you some of those hairs. This guy has a bunch of them.
Hairy tea.
Yeah, I don't know if we have we'll show you a close up from another video, but they have these white hairs on them and you'll see them floating around.
Yeah, that's a little peachy. It looks like a little peach fuzz.
Yeah, exactly. So those, and those are called hao. So if you ever heard like silver needle white tea, the Chinese name is bai hao yin zhen. Yep. It's a hao, bai hao, white hao. Yin zhen with silver needle. So it's definitely like, it's definitely one of the slept on teas in that it's really tasty. It's very good and it's sweet. It definitely like fits the taste of a lot of the like American tea drinkers or like, non-Chinese tea drinkers. And yet it's like not very well known outside of China, which is really a shame. So this first steep, we're going to do a wash. The color is going to be darker as you see once it actually like comes through. So this first steep, you can drink it, but it's
looks like a gorgeous kind of golden peachy color.
Yeah, it's nice. So you can pick whichever tea pet you'd like to dump on. Dump on them. Give the frog.
Here we go.
Give it to the frog.
Where's Clyde?
Clyde is over there somewhere. Clyde is a little bit of a big deal. It's hard to book Clyde for these things.
Oh.
Clyde's like busy.
Okay.
He's got projects.
He's got projects.
He's got projects. Hashtag Team Clyde.
He's
always
LA,
just constantly trending on TikTok. But he's good at what he does. What can we say? He sits there. He has keyboard on him. Yeah. Not many people. They think they can do it. They can't do it. They can't do it.
Do you drink coffee?
I actually have had like 7 cups of coffee in my whole life.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm not a big coffee drinker. I just didn't like the taste, and then. Now that I do this sort of like, the tea thing, I think a lot of people have been asking me about coffee. Should I try coffee? I actually would be interested in trying some good coffee. I wonder how much of my aversion to the taste of coffee was like when I was younger, I had like really bad coffee.
Sure.
In the same way, like some people are like, I don't like tea. Because they had like a Lipton tea bag that was steeped for 8 minutes once. And then they're like, oh, tea is bad. I'm like, nah, man.
Another thing you might like to try, there are many other caffeinated plants that are used for drinks, mostly in the ilex genus. So
you're bringing out the scientific.
Caffeinated holly plants like Wayusa. Yes, yerba mate is in the family, but there's others like Wayusa is one.
I really want to try that. I mean, I'd love to do a.
Some of them make delicious beverages.
I'd love to do a travel show sometime where I can try like teas of the world and like go and do that. Cheers.
Cheers.
By the way, enjoy the white tea.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, it's so fruity smelling. Wow.
It's just like, what do you think?
Wow, I love this. It's almost like a nutty flavor.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an herbal taste to it because it's aged 2017, so that's 6 years aged.
Wow.
So the aging brings out the herbal flavor, and it'll be even more clear in the middle steeps. But like,
I love it.
I just think that the like really good tea, what I always look for is like there's a lot going on, but it's not overpowering. Like there's no one note that's like, oh, this is like too sweet or too bitter or too whatever.
It's beautiful color.
Love that. It's a very good tea. The this tea has been a hit. We've already had to restock it twice.
Wow.
Which is great.
Yeah, I can see why. It's delicious.
So anyway, I want to talk a little bit more about the cool stuff you were telling me about your AI.
Yeah.
AI language learning. What is this? It's an AI language learning robot?
Yeah, it's a bilingual speech-to-speech conversation partner. And I mean, the inspiration for this is just inspired by my direct experience of learning through tutors, which speaking is the best way to learn a language. Like I've found this through trial and error, having studied with dozens of languages, and having studied more languages than possibly anybody else on the planet at this point, I figured out what works and what doesn't work, and speaking practice works. Yeah, and it's not only does it work, but it's also the most effective and it's the best. And then but when I try to tell people like, hey, they're like, hey, how do I get good at a language as fast as possible? I'm like, go find a speaking partner. They're like, oh, but that's expensive, or like, I work weird hours. I can't schedule times with tutors, or like, it takes too long and I have to schedule like these hour-long chunks, or like people then hears it makes me too anxious. Like I just don't want to do speaking practice. I can't open my mouth and say the first thing without feeling like they're going to judge me for how shitty my accent is, right? So I think this is where AI can play an amazing role because it's cheaper, it's less awkward, and it's way easier to schedule, and you can do it while taking a shit on the toilet, and
That's true. Is this like your general like thing for like the best language is learned while taking a shit on the toilet? Is that like that's
no,
the ideal place?
I don't think like no. I would encourage people to sit down and make half an hour or an hour a day to to do focus study. But the reality is like many people can't do that, or they don't want to. They just don't have the time.
Even like just the I remember my time in China, like. There's a weird amount of learning that goes on while you're on the toilet or in between things of like you'll get people to send a 60-second voice message to you on WeChat.
Yep.
Now you have to hear this and like, okay, what are they saying? And then reply to it, even though it is not literal speaking practice. It essentially is speaking practice.
Right. So perhaps taking a shit on the toilet is a bit too cavalier. I would say it's more like to fill in those kind of interstitial moments where you're transitioning between activities and you want to practice, like maybe you have 5 minutes. Yeah. But if all you have is 5 minutes, then that's better than no minutes. Yeah. And if you have only 5 minutes per day and you do that for a year, like you're going to be speaking something if all you've been doing in those 5 minutes is speaking practice.
That is true.
Right? Like you're going to
realized I left this thing off the side. We really have to have somebody. Okay. Let's get back to your thing. All right. Imagine that was magically solved. All right. So you're saying if you only have 5 minutes, it's still worth putting in that energy and time then?
Yeah, it's better than no minutes. And you will get results from just 5 minutes of speaking.
Do you think that like speaking, like what makes speaking so good for learning languages? I mean, I know that sounds kind of like a stupid question, but there's reading, there's writing, there's listening, there are many things you could be spending your time on. What about speaking really makes it work?
It's the recall. It's the active recall of what you've learned. And what I've noticed is that if you simply study passively, you will learn something, but it's not going to be remotely comparable to what you will learn by active recall. And like, yes, you do get value by saying phrases aloud from a book or a course, and that is valuable. But what's even more valuable is when you say things out loud with some other entity, previously.
Well, that's what feels like so stupid. Like, ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Is like no one ever has been like stopping people on the street and having to ask where the library is.
That's right.
Like, and it feels like I failed so thoroughly at being a real human being that it almost doesn't matter what you say back to me. I'm already dead inside. Like,
yeah, that's right. And so if you're learning these stilted phrases, you're not really learning the language. I mean, if your goal is to learn to speak, then the way that you do that is by speaking. It's the way that most people learn a language is it's now like in school and in typical courses and at university, it's analogous to learning to ride a bike by reading a book on physics. Like in theory, yes, you must maintain a precise angular momentum in order for the gyroscopic activity of the bike. But you're not actually learning to ride the bike. And it's only when you can connect the mental muscle of your activity, of how you move, of how your legs move, of how your arms move, to the motion of the bike, that you can then learn to really ride the bike. And it's the same with languages.
Yeah, and then this is why I love improv comedy as a way of teaching language. Like I would do improv in a second language, and we would have people in China that would come and do improv in English. And when you do an improv scene, it's perfect because it doesn't mean anything. You can fail. Go ahead and do it. Go ahead and fail. Well, the scene will be over in 3 minutes. But for those 3 minutes, it really feels like it matters because you're up on stage. Yeah. So you'll be in all sorts of predicaments you wouldn't normally find yourself in, and you have to be like all synapses firing, try and understand the who, what, when, where, why. Yeah. Get your language moving and try to, and if you can even be funny, be funny. Although as an improv person, I will say, don't go for the joke. You're like, you don't need to do that. It will come. But that speaking practice, I feel, is so important. And do you feel like getting kind of a halfway to a real person sort of with the AI will help people overcome that sort of fear of talking to other people?
I don't know, actually. I'm neutral on that question.
It's new, right?
But I will say that I don't know if it'll help you overcome your anxiety of speaking with a real person, but I do know that it will help you learn to speak. That I'm 100% confident in.
Well, that's a good point. How much of that?
And when you get better at speaking with an AI, then you'll also be better at speaking with a person. And in theory, that should reduce your anxiety speaking with a person as well.
Because it's definitely like, part of the anxiety is the language, and part of the anxiety is you're just not good at it. Like,
right,
if you're doing something in public you're not good at.
Yeah, so I see this as a bridge to being able to get speaking practice without having to face that initial massive wave of anxiety that comes with speaking with a real human being.
Do you feel like a worry about, I mean, this is kind of one of those grand AI topics, but do you feel like the AI language learning, translation programs and apps are going to get to the point where they're so good, there's just no reason to learn a language anymore?
Well, we're already at that phase.
You think so?
I don't think that, there's no, right now, translation is already so good that, for the most part, you don't, you can go to any country on the planet right now with Google Translate and, get around fine. You don't really need to learn a language for practical purposes. But I'll say a couple things. I'll say, one, people want the human connection. People want to be able to really say something and make somebody's day by speaking the language, and you're never going to get that through an app. Doesn't matter how good the apps get.
Well, it's
right? And when they see that you've done that work and you appreciate their culture, you understand that their culture even exists, is even a thing, then they'll reciprocate, and they'll be excited to see you and excited to see that you made an effort to learn something about them. And that's exciting. And that human connection, that's always going to be a thing. And in fact, I think it's going to be an even greater thing the stronger that AI gets. We're going to need that human connection more.
Well, this is one of those things
And the other thing that I'll say is this is almost similar to what happened with chess as well. Computers have gotten so good at chess and so much better than humans. Right now, you can run on the shittiest PC, on off-the-shelf computer software that can beat easily beat 9 times out of 10 the world's greatest human chess player. And yet, chess has never been more popular in the world. And it's because, you know, we need things to do as humans that are beyond AI. And we can still study chess and enjoy it as a game without thinking that we're going to compete and exceed humans.
Well, it's kind of like the weird thing I've noticed about a lot of this stuff is the cheaper it becomes to do things pretty well, the more it matters to people that you spent all that extra energy to get the last couple percent, you know?
Exactly. It's like diamonds.
Yeah.
You know, natural diamonds, for whatever reason, people want, even when, as is the case now, synthetic diamonds are actually better. Synthetic diamonds are actually clearer, they're actually shinier, they're actually better cut, you know, than real natural diamonds that came from the earth. But people, and they're harder, they're better in every respect. But people still prefer
the natural
diamonds because there's a story behind them. Because it came from this billion-year-old process that produced these rocks under intense pressure, and then you got it from the ground, and that's what you want.
I remember I was reading a book, and they're
like 10x more expensive than the synthetic diamonds.
Yeah, which is crazy if you think about it. I remember I was reading a book, and they mentioned this sort of thing. They said like a DVD player is like a marvel of engineering, incredibly well designed, like fit to amazing precision product, and you can buy one for $20. Yeah. But a bowl that is handmade by a potter could be worth hundreds of dollars. Yeah. And
or thousands if it's an antique.
Thousands, you know? Yeah, exactly. And so the question is why, and I think the one reason the author said was that in a world of amazing wealth of stuff, the one thing that will never go away, that we'll never have too much of, is time. Your life is only so long as your life is. And if you have the time of a master or the time of an expert, that time is even more valuable because you know they also only get 24 hours in the day. So if you have, I think that's kind of, to some degree, why maybe even people watch the Tea channel is like, you know, you can go on Amazon and search tea. Like, this is not a secret, or I hope it's not.
Right.
Otherwise, I just really blew it. But like, no. Right. But the thing is,
they want your selection.
Well, they want
like, your curation.
I've spent so much time drinking so many teas, and I try really hard not to put junk on the website, and there's no junk on the website. Yep. Everything that I select, at least I liked. And even that basic process, but put through the lens of somebody that has a lot, like resources in tea, you know, it doesn't do me much good to be selecting amongst teas on Amazon or whatever, because a lot of that stuff is not so good. But,
and the cool part is that as an American who enjoys Chinese tea, you know, you have a really unique insight into what other Americans might like.
Well, that was the thing. It's like, go to a tea mountain, and they will try to get you to buy 18 different types of raw pu'er. And I'm like, I like that, but I can't explain to the audience the difference between 18 types of raw pu'er. Maybe 2. Yeah. But like maybe an aged and a young. And I hope that eventually the audience really will, you know, people will see more and more of the videos, and maybe people would like at one time to have a box that's like 4 different raw pu'ers and together. But like the tea people in China don't really have a good grasp of what will be interesting for the Western tea drinkers. And some people use this to essentially trick people, which is to say they'll buy bad tea and they'll say it's whatever Chinese traditional blah, blah, blah. But it's just a tea that the Chinese people wouldn't drink, so that's why they could get it cheap. A lot of the, like, you know, basically anything you find in a tea bag is kind of going to be like that. You know, you can abuse the fact that people need this help nowadays to sort through the junk. Yeah. And so maybe to some degrees, learning the language is sorting through the human junk. To say, like, I have put in the time to try to communicate with you, and it was costly and it was difficult, and I didn't practically even need to do it. You know, I did it because I really care and I want to learn from you, and I want to show with my finite resource of my time that I really am at least approaching this with an open heart and an open mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's say, just from your experiences, like, you know, can you share a time when you learned a language that maybe is a small or a niche language, and then what the people thought about it when you showed up and were able to speak?
Oh, so many. I mean, I mean, you know, indigenous American languages, Navajo, Ojibwe, Yucatec Maya, you know, like to this day, I get emails from native tribes around North America asking me, like, can I come to their community and learn their language and, you know, help promote their language and culture, you know, which are in many cases sadly dying out, you know, and like those that's like the most exciting.
That's really
emails
cool
to read, right? And yeah.
What kind of challenges do you have when you're learning, say, like a Native American language? Are there anything specific about them from the language perspective, linguistic perspective?
Oh, they're the hardest.
They're really hard.
Yeah, North American languages tend to be extremely difficult because they're agglutinative and like
No gluten free.
They're very they just work in very unexpected ways that you would never see in Eurasian or African languages.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, well, like, so Navajo, for example, has animacy where depending on the noun class, the you know, like you can't say the boy, you know, the bird pecks the girl. You have to say the girl was pecked by the bird because the bird is less animate. It's like a kind of a lower spiritual order and so you have to constantly keep the word order in mind. But then also additionally, like, verbs are extremely complex, and you know, everything is made from a stem. So to say the word for example plow, you need to construct that from the root word for dig, and then you have to modify it with like 6 different stems, you know, to talk about how deep the digging is, and you know, like what time of year the digging is occurring, and you know, who the speaker is, and all of these different suffixes and prefixes in order to change the meaning of the root. So it's like trying to construct a language out of Lego bricks, and it just gets extremely complicated.
Well, this is one of the things. It's like language evolved to be something that was learned like when you're a child and you pick it up slowly over many years, and it's like it really didn't evolve. Like the language makes no promise that you'll ever be able to learn it as an adult. You know?
Yeah, and I think what happens is when you get communities that have been more isolated over thousands of years, they tend to develop more intricate, and this is my pet theory, but they tend to develop more intricate and complex languages because they don't have. There's no need for foreigners to learn these languages.
It's like the exact opposite of a pigeon, which is to say, because we all needed to figure this out real fast, we made it simple.
A perfect example of language in the opposite direction is Malay Indonesian, where you know, because of the intense trading that occurred in Southeast Asia over the Straits of Malacca for thousands of years, you know, that language, again, this is my kind of personal pet theory, needed to be very easily learned by foreigners or by, you know, people with different tribal languages, and they all needed some kind of lingua franca that had to be simple enough that many different people from different ethnic backgrounds could use to communicate together.
So would you say Malay is one of the easier languages to learn then?
Yes, it's in my opinion, it's the easiest language to learn. That easiest language that an alien could learn. Like if you or me as English speakers wanted to learn like an easy language, it would be Dutch or Norwegian or Swedish. But like like the easiest language that an alien from outer space who's coming to Earth to learn, it'd probably be like Malay or Indonesian, I think.
This is also another point that people are like, whether a language is hard or easy to learn, it depends on who you are.
It does, but there are languages that are more or less absolutely easy to learn. Just because, you know, if a verb conjugates 6 different ways in one, or 100 different ways in one language, and it conjugates 0 different ways in another language, like one is objectively easier than the other.
That makes sense. That's one of the things I liked about Chinese was I always hated conjugating my verbs in Spanish.
Oh yeah, conjugation sucks. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, and
no language should have conjugation.
If you could be ruler of the universe and change everybody's brains,
I would abolish conjugation. There's many features of language. I would abolish tense probably. I would abolish.
Tense?
Yeah.
Is that not useful?
Tense is also
Was it not useful? Will it not be useful?
From context, it usually is useful. Yesterday, it is useful.
Yeah. Yes,
is perfectly intelligible. You don't need to say yesterday it was useful.
Oh, that's true.
So, and that's how Chinese works. Well, that's how many Asian languages work.
Got me questioning myself.
Right.
Yesterday, is it useful? Right. But you're totally true in the sense that, like, you know, in Chinese you have particles which are kind of annoying, but but fundamentally,
Chinese is not a perfect language. I mean, in terms of easy, I think for me, Indonesian approaches that like platonic ideal of an easy to learn and elegant language. But that language is not perfect either. There's no really perfect language.
So if you could, again, in the sense of you're the you know, emperor of the universe sort of thing, if you could make a change to the way we teach language in the United States, what would it be?
Oh, I think everybody should have an iPad connected with a kid in Guatemala if you're learning Spanish, and vice versa. The kids in Guatemala should have, they're all learning English through kids in the United States. And so like the teacher does a lesson. Hey, this is our 10-minute drill about how, how the past tense works, and now we're actually going to practice it with kids in Spain or Mexico or Guatemala, and then we're going to speak, and then they're going to do the reverse in English, and we can do that right now. Yeah. But I don't know. I think with AI, it also would be cool, which is why we're building this AI.
Also, time zones are a problem.
Yes, time zones can be a problem too. So I think that AI in the future will be very helpful for this. But yeah, I mean, I think just in general, like actual speaking practice,
more practical practice, because it's kind of like the thing is I remember somebody once said, like, if a time traveler from the 1800s were to come to our modern age, they would recognize almost nothing about life except for a classroom. Like they would be like, oh yeah, they're all still sitting in rows and with some major, the couple minor exceptions. And let's be honest, if you live in a wealthier place where they have teachers that spend time planning special lessons and seminars and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think the education system needs to be really overhauled.
Yeah, but so for practical language learning, if you are somebody who is starting, they say I'm interested in languages, but I've never really attacked a language by myself out of a classroom. What are your advice for people?
Start speaking as early as possible would be my kind of main piece of advice. And then also consistency, just like doing it and grinding at it for a long time is the only way that you're going to get good.
So don't feel bad if you're not good in the beginning.
Right, because you're not going to be good, and it's going to take you a very long time to actually get good. But also, like, I would also make sure that you question whether you really want this, because there's lots of things in life that you could be good at, that you could do. And language is one of those things that's going to take you a very long time to get good at. And you should ask yourself like that hard question in the beginning of like, do I really want to do this? Like, do I really want to spend an hour of my precious time every day for the next 3 years on learning French to be able to speak it, with any semblance of accuracy, right? And like, that's like a question you could, because what else could you be doing at that time? You could be spending that with your kids. You could be learning piano. You could be exercising. You could be playing golf. Like, there's so many things in this world. You could be playing video games or watching TV. Like, there's so many things you could be doing. Ask yourself, how badly do you really want it?
Yeah. That's also one of the reasons I tell people, like, a lot of people come to me and they're like, should I learn Mandarin? I'm like, if you will enjoy the process of learning Mandarin, you should definitely do it. But that's because it is so hard to learn that you can't even say like, oh, I want to be able to read, whatever, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms in the original language.
You're never going to be able to read Romance.
It's very hard to do.
You're never. Like,
it's hard.
The only way that's going to be, like, I can't read Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Like, the only way that's going to happen is you're going to be studying Chinese for 10 years. And it's not, it's funny. Practically, it's an impossible.
And then there's even these things where, like, I remember my biggest pet peeve of being even a high-level Chinese speaker here is going to a Chinese restaurant where there's a Chinese painting on the wall and somebody has scribbled impossible to read calligraphy.
Right. And your dumb American friends are like, hey, Jesse, what does that say? And you're like, I don't know. And you're like, I thought you spoke Chinese, Jesse. What does that say?
It's funny. It's like literally as a linguistic performance artist who, like, that is like one of the weirdest, hardest things to do is understand other people's like weird calligraphy script. And it's also poetic and it's like not at all any regular language you'd ever use in real life. And yet it happens to be the most common way people see Chinese characters in the regular life
in America.
So that's really cool. I have a couple other just language questions I never get to talk about with people. But what do you think of the idea of like language academies, like these places that they'll have a part of the government that is like, this is how French is spoken. This is how Spanish is spoken. These are the right words and the right spellings, and these are not. Do you think that's just like pompous, idiocy, or is there a real value to being able to prune where the bounds of a language begins and ends?
It's a good question. I've kind of gone back and forth. I think that it could potentially be valuable, but I think that most of their efforts are really misplaced. I think these organizations tend to be very prescriptive rather than descriptive, and they create rules that are in many cases unnecessary. Like, first of all, for me, I think that most questions of spelling and orthography are basically wastes of time. Like, why does spelling matter? It doesn't really matter. Like, I think that if you're asking me a normative question about orthography, my answer would be everything should be spelled always exactly as it's spoken. And there should be no distinction between the writing system and the speaking.
In an ideal
and to
world.
the extent, in an ideal world, yes. And to the extent that there is, any divergence there is a complete waste of time. And there's no reason, as far as efficiency goes, to have like this crazy wacky spelling that we have in English, you know, or like all the French academies that maintain, you know, and I'm probably going to get canceled for saying this, that maintain
the
like
French Academy's got a lot of weight.
How you know spelling, how like French spelling is maintained. Like, why do you bother? Why not make French spelling work exactly as it's spoken?
I will say, I like legit never was interested in learning French because I just couldn't get over the fact that you would have these things where it's like 5 letters and it made one sound. And I was like A-E-O-U-X, and then and it's spelled like O or whatever. Like, you know, like.
But then you went and learned Chinese, where
worse.
the writing is even worse. Like like everything in China could be written with pinyin. And it's not, you know? And if you ask Chinese people why, they'll say, oh, well, it's because actually we have too many homophones in the language. And like, but that's really, that's not a correct understanding.
The arrow of time is backwards. Like you're self-justifying this to yourself.
It's a justification. Like the reality is that everything in China could be pinyin and there would be no problems. Because like, if you can speak it, you know, like, and it can be understood, then it can be written.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the actual reason for maintaining Chinese characters is that Chinese people like Chinese characters and they want their heritage and culture to be preserved, which is a totally valid reason for maintaining Chinese characters. But if you were to make me the linguistic master of the world and like and you wanted to make the most efficient language system, then like of course you would get rid of Chinese characters.
Well,
of course you would get rid of the French Academy, you know, for language spelling.
They have linguists, professional linguists have a complete like phonetic alphabet of all the sounds the human mouth can make that they've discovered in any
Everything
language.
would be written in IPA, you know? It's
So it's have you learned IPA? Do you know all these sounds?
I actually don't. I'm ashamed to say this, but as a professional linguist, I actually don't. I actually can't read IPA. What I do for people who aren't familiar, the International Phonetic Alphabet is yes, there is actually an alphabet that can be used to transcribe, in theory, every sound made by every language. I've studied it in the past. What I found is that there seems to be like a disagreement over which sounds represent, like over which letters actually represent. Like to me, it doesn't seem a really perfect system for being able to represent sounds. Like I've seen some kind of discrepancy there between what letters are used and what sounds actually get created. So I haven't really spent too much time on it. Really what I do with most languages when I study them is I'll transcribe them how I hear them using English phonemes and the way that things sound to me in English. And I'll use an O where it feels appropriate to me and a U where it feels appropriate. And I'll just create my own ersatz, idiosyncratic representation of that language when I, using the letters that seem right to me. Which kind of is awkward when I will share those notes with the native speaker, and they'll be like, "That's not how this is spelled." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's just my own kind of convention."
Well, that can really trigger a lot of people who spent their whole life teaching their language as a second language.
Yeah, it does trigger people. It triggers teachers occasionally, but I know that I'm right.
You might be right for you.
It's right for me. Yeah, exactly. But I also think that generally speaking, I think too much time gets paid in language learning to reading and writing, and not enough to speaking and listening.
Yeah, well,
far more important.
And this kind of brings back the question: is it underdone because it's difficult to test? Or is it underdone because people really don't value it as much? Because I have the suspicion that because doing one-on-one speaking practice is so time-consuming that the educational system has just basically ignored it because how would you do it with a big classroom of people?
I think that's exactly right. I think it's underdone because it's hard to do in an educational classroom setting. Yeah. You can't you can't have one-on-one speaking practice in a classroom. Yeah. I mean, I think that now with technology, again, if you have an iPad with a kid of your same age in another country, or with AI, I think now it's getting more and more possible.
You seem very determined to get labor out of children in Guatemala. It's just like
no. It's not. It's an exchange.
I know.
Right. So at the same time, they're learning English too.
Yeah.
You know, and so you do these exchanges and.
Yeah. Here's a question I have for you as somebody who lived in China, and I would sometimes run up against Chinese people who just refused to speak to me in Chinese. They were determined this would be their English language practice time. Yeah. What do you do when you hit somebody like that?
Well, first of all, I try to understand where they're coming from. I mean, like, you know, there's not that many foreigners in China.
Yeah.
You know, and so when they see you, it's like, hey, like, let's speak some, you know, English. But I think for me, like, frankly, I feel like it's a little rude to be that way. But, and I also just generally, like, you know, like I would try not to associate with people if it feels too much like this is just devolving into a language practice. Like if you want language practice, like, you know, you can make language partners with somebody.
That was what I was saying.
You could do like half an hour English, half an hour Chinese as a study session, or like you can hire a language tutor. You know, like there are things you can do like that. But if I'm making friends with somebody, like I'll just speak to them in whatever language feels natural. You know, like I have Chinese friends who I'll speak English with, and I have Chinese friends who I'll speak Chinese with, and you know, or in like a mix of both. Yeah. You know, it just really whatever feels natural depending on the situation and context.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to play it, because like I also was like I could imagine if I were really interested in learning a language and it was just so hard to get the speaking practice. Yeah. It all comes down to the fact that it's really hard to get speaking practice. I think people would feel less eager to force that in, even if it's unnatural, in a world where they felt like they had enough. You know, so that's, you know, all the more reason to get the AI going.
Practice, right? Yeah. AI, and you know, but also just better classroom experience in general. I mean, I think that like sitting there and listening to your teacher drone on for 45 minutes is a perfect way to spend 7 years of your life learning a language and come away with nothing to show for it.
Yeah, it's really and God
Absolutely
knows
nothing.
We know
so how many Americans, probably most people watching to this, you know, have had the experience of sitting in a classroom for years and years and not being able to speak like a single sentence.
Yeah.
You know, and that also includes me. Like a lot of people are like, oh, you're such a genius language learner. I mean, I spent 7 years in high school, 8 years learning Latin and Hebrew and Greek and not being able to speak any of those languages. Yeah. You know, it's a shame. It's a waste of time.
Well, that's one of the things that I always am like very encouraging other people to do. They're like, oh, wow, you learned this really well. What books did you use, or how did you do it? And I'm like, well, first of all, the books are useful. I think at some point, especially for vocab, there just comes a point where you need to know how to say microwave and you need to know how to say steak. Yeah. And like, you know, there's a certain amount of words you just kind of have to memorize.
And textbooks give you structure, courses give you structure, especially like in a university setting or a classroom setting. One of the best things about those experiences, like you have to come to class, otherwise you will get an F. So you got to show up and you got to do it, and like that at least gives you some structure, even if the teaching isn't great.
Yeah, and but then also I think that like we're reaching this era now where there's so many resources that you can learn the way you want to learn. And so I think that like to hear kind of that you create your own writing systems, and it's like on one hand that sounds like it would be difficult, but on the other hand it sounds totally natural. It's like, why wouldn't you take that short-term thing now that will be good for you now, even at the risk of like long-term, if you were to be an author in that language, it would be harder, but you're not going to be an author in that language.
Yeah, a lot of people will say to me, oh, well, you need to learn proper spelling immediately, otherwise you're never going to be a good speller in the language. But it's just like, it's like such a silly argument. Like, did you never ride a bicycle with training wheels? I mean, you know, like at some point, yes, I will. If I really, first of all, I usually, in most cases, I don't actually want to learn to read or write, so I don't care. So it doesn't matter for me. Like whatever's the quickest way to learn speaking, that's what I want to learn. But even if I did want to learn to read and write, like I can use these quick shortcuts in the beginning, and then the more I learn how to speak, then at some point I will layer on the correct spelling and the correct orthography and you know, the correct punctuation, and get good at those things. And I think this is what was I gonna? I just totally lost my train of thought. But
at some point you will learn the other things. You know,
yeah. You know, at some point, right, exactly, or not. And the thing is, like, this is such a classic mistake that I think a lot of Chinese teachers, for example, will make. They'll say, "Hey, well, we need to learn how to write the Chinese characters first." And why? Because that was their experience in school, was learning Chinese characters the first day in the classroom. But what they actually misunderstand about that experience is that their day one in the classroom, they actually spoke fluent Mandarin. They came into that classroom having literally spent years of their life perfecting spoken Mandarin, speaking at a level that almost no foreigner will ever approach. And they learned that Mandarin through years of immersion with their parents and with friends.
The best language environment possible.
The best possible language immersion environment, already speaking Mandarin at an incredibly high level, and then you come into the classroom, and on day one, you learn characters, but you already speak perfect Mandarin.
Well, that's the thing.
You know?
It's like
so, like, when you teach a foreigner how to speak Mandarin, like, speak first. You know, like, you can't learn characters without speaking first.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love how jazzed up you got about that. Like, I have a feeling you're like literally gonna. If there was a Chinese teacher right now, you would punch them. Like, you would just.
No, I'm not punching people, but you know, like, yes, it is something that I get passionate about because, like, again, I've like really gotten good at this because I've spent so much time, so much time learning languages, and I've really figured out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah,
you know?
and so that's the sort of thing where, like, let's say that you have somebody that wants to learn a obscure language, or your whatever, your Navajo, your Nahuatl, or something like that, and they want to learn now. What are the best ways that somebody can go about learning a rare language like that?
Well, I mean, an obscure language is something that you really have to learn through a speaking partner, because you can't, like, you simply, there's no Navajo textbook. I mean, it just doesn't exist. I mean, there are some grammatical resources on Navajo, but, you know, there are no Navajo courses. Like, there's nothing that's going to handhold you through learning Navajo. You have to find a conversation partner, and you have to build up your own course and your own curriculum from scratch. So it's a very challenging experience to learn Navajo. And so I wouldn't suggest to most people to, like, unless you are Navajo and you want to learn the language of your culture and your community, in which case you probably do have a speaking partner that you can learn. But you know, I would suggest that if somebody is learning a language for the first time, I think pick like a mass market language. Pick something that's a little bit more learner friendly in the beginning.
Somewhere you'll have help for. I mean, I remember there's
right, Spanish, French, even Chinese these days. There's so many resources for learning Mandarin.
Yeah, I remember the people who I sometimes am really impressed with as Chinese speakers are not necessarily the Mandarin speakers, but the people who somehow manage to learn a dialect. Because that's hard. Oh, yeah. Like, especially if it's a rare dialect. Like, I met this guy once who was also a tea guy, and he spoke Kunmingese, Kunminghua. And because his girlfriend, his girlfriends only spoke Kunminghua. He was like a backpacker. He never learned Mandarin. He only speaks Kunminghua. That's amazing. And it's like, but it's like, if you want,
he speaks no Mandarin, only Kunminghua.
At the time I met him, that's what he told me. And so the question was like, it's like, how would you learn it? You have to have that language partner. And so it's kind of the joke. I would kind of joke to say, like, I've studied Chinese and gotten my Chinese to a really high level, but I may be the highest level of someone not married to a Chinese person. Because, like, like, usually you kind of have to listen to people talk for like your whole life and get a lot of that hearing in. So
yeah, I mean, I also have had the experience of learning obscure Chinese. They're really languages, but we call them dialects as well. And those, like, if you're gonna learn like Fuzhouhua or Taishanhua or these specific city level Chinese languages, like there's no course for these things. And in fact, even in a language where there might be 5 million or 10 million speakers, like with Fuzhouhua, it's very rare to find somebody who can actually afford the time to sit down and teach you, because there's just not that much demand to learn these languages. Like, if you're a foreigner learning Chinese, you're almost certainly learning Mandarin or Cantonese. Yeah. And, even Chinese people are very rare. Like, if you're learning Chinese to speak with your relatives, you're probably learning Mandarin. Yeah. It's pretty rare that you'd be learning one of these rare dialects.
The obscure languages. Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you again for coming on. I think we're probably about out of time. I want to do a couple last, like, lightning round, one sentence responses. So just quick lightning response round for Xiaoma. Okay. What was your favorite language to learn?
Navajo, just because how crazy it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your least favorite language to learn?
I was gonna say Navajo too, because how crazy it was. But no, I gotta get something different. Least favorite language to learn?
Or most annoying?
Most annoying. Oh my God, yeah. Some of the Indian languages, like the South Indian languages, they're beautiful, but they just conjugate in such complex ways that they were a pain to learn.
Yeah, definitely. What's the language that you were most surprised that you enjoyed to learn?
Welsh.
Welsh.
Just beautiful language. Beautiful. The sounds, the language, I just loved it. And also the experience of going there and chatting with locals in Welsh was really cool.
I bet they love that.
They thought it was really cool.
What's the best gift you've been given by somebody after they've discovered you've learned their language?
Free food, free stuff in general. I love like getting free food from Africans or Pakistanis or Europeans, when I speak their language. It just is exciting.
That's fun.
It's fun.
What would you say to these people that are like, we should have a national language?
Why? Like, who says that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say this. I do think there is a lot of value in having everybody in the country speak the same language. And as Americans, we can sometimes like lose sight of that. But like, in a country like India, for example, where there is no one language, if everybody speaks a different language, it can be hard for people to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, you should also have like a language of your culture that you can also speak. I think it brings a lot of value in diversity and value in, preserving your culture and heritage.
Yeah. And if you're trying to learn a language, but you're just frightened to speak, what is the one thing that you can do to try to get over that fear?
Yourteacher.ai.
Oh, whoa.
Thanks, Jesse.
There we go.
Yeah, where you can learn to speaking practice with an artificial intelligence language tutor.
Very cool. So I'm really excited about this. I mean, I really have, I've been hoping to talk to you more about language stuff for a while, and it just so happens you're in LA. It's great to have you over at the tea house. What did you think of the tea?
Oh my God, it was great. I love the tea. I love the white tea. I love the pu'er. Delicious, and I'm a little bit tea drunk.
Yeah, a little tea drunk over here. So I'm going to give you this to take home with you. You can keep the rest of the white tea. And for all of you, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on the video, be aware we have the full episode of this available on podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. The links will be in the description. If you're listening to this on the audio, know that we come out with highlight versions that are edited for YouTube and also on all the shorts channels. Tea Time with Jesse. I've set up like new channels on all the different platforms just for the show, hoping that eventually this really will grow and we'll get even more amazing guests like Xiaoma on here. This is kind of the goal. Like, I feel like there's so much great stuff that kind of just happens around tea. Yeah. And so that's what I'm eager to share with everybody. If you're interested in the teas, all the teas that we are drinking today are on my website. You can go get them. The tea tables as well, the tea pets, the tea equipment, even the tea scoop. All that stuff is on jessesteahouse.com. All the stock is in America. We have a warehouse in New Jersey, so we ship out within 2 days. And it's a really great way to not only support the channel and support the show, but also you get like great tea. So you have anything else, last thing you want to share with our audience?
Check out the teas. Great stuff.
Check out the teas. Very good. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Xiaoma, for coming over.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you guys next episode. Have a good one.
Cool.
Bye.
See you.